Okay, so now we're gonna do a quick demo, right? And I'm gonna show you I think just three faces, and then I'm going to test you on some of them, and then I'm going to get a final measure of test to see how well you've retained it. Okay, so here we go. You study this face. Here you go, another one. Okay, now I want you to pick which face did you see previously. Okay, if you're normal, you probably pick the right face. Okay, what about now? Okay, if you're like most people, you'll pick the left face. If and now what about now? Again, you probably would pick the left face, I would think. What about now? Again, probably the right face. What about now? So, usually when I do this demonstration, it doesn't always work, but if usually what happens is people have no problem with the previous last tests, the last two tests, but then they fail. About 50% of the people do pick the wrong face here. Why is that? So I'll show you what happened, right? So this first column are the study phases that you studied. And then we had a little review phase, okay, where, right, so this face was paired up with another face, and it was an easy review test, right? This face didn't get any review test, whereas this face didn't actually even get anything, right? It was it was modified slightly, and now it looks like this. So now, but I said if one of them has to be studied or not, right? That was the idea at least. And if, that suggests that one of these has to be a previously studied face. Okay. And by committing to this, right, this post-event information and committing to it, the idea is that that will influence or distort your memory for that event. Okay. That such that when I show you these two faces side by side, this review phase, right, seeing this face during the review phase has made it harder for you to remember the original face, almost like it's being written over. And so there's actually a real world analog to this, which I wanted to point out. So if anybody's ever heard of Ronald Cotton was exonerated. He was falsely convicted for sexual assault of Jennifer Thompson in I think the 80s or maybe late 70s. And then DNA eventually exonerated him of the assault. And Jennifer Thompson actually talks about this, and she says, like, when it happened, when I was being assaulted, I remember looking at the guy's face, trying to encode it and pay as much attention as I could, so that if I survived, I would be able to identify the person out of a lineup. Well, for whatever reason, Ronald Cotton was put into a lineup instead of the real person who was named Bobby Poole. And at first, you know, they actually, she said, like, uh, when she was first shown the lineup, she said, "Well, I don't know. I don't know if the person's in this lineup. It could be five, but I'm not that confident about it." So she wasn't really even that confident about it. But the police investigator was a little pushy and contaminated her memory because what happened was over time she became convinced, right? Actually, what happened was, just to tell you more of the story, like, so she said, "Yeah, I don't know, but maybe five." And then the guy said, "That's good. That's our suspect." And so she was like, "Oh, well, then I guess I was right." And then she sort of went, and then over time, she goes, "Oh, I guess I was right. I was right." Her confidence builds. And, of course, Rhonda Cotton got convicted. But then years later, they found out, well, so Bobby Poole and Ronald Cotton were in the same prison. same place. And actually, prisoners would get them mixed up all the time, not just white people, but also black people. And what about that? So, and then Bobby Poole actually told somebody about it that he actually assaulted Jennifer Thompson, not Ronald Cotton. And so Ronald Cotton went to the court and said, I want to retry my case. And one thing led to another, and that he got he got exonerated, right? Ronald Cotton did. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that Jennifer Thompson states, right? She says, I was in court when Ronald Cotton was being retried. And I remember my blood was boiling. I was livid. I was like, who is this guy who thinks that he can do this? And she was so mad at Ronald Cotton. But when Bobby Poole was there, she didn't feel any rage. She wasn't angry at Bobby Poole at all, which tells us that, right, picking Ronald Cotton out of the lineup essentially rewrote her memory. Okay, let's do one more, and then I think we're almost done. Okay, and here's another one of misinformation of how misinformation can affect you, how it can rewrite your memory, basically. In this study, this was actually I forget what it's called, but it's like a prisoner of war camp or prisoner of war training. So if you join the military, certain parts of the military, I guess, they put you in this training for if you ever became a prisoner of war, right? Don't tell our secrets, right? That kind of thing. How do you withstand the stress and trauma of this? And so everybody, or like a certain number of the army or whatever, some division had to do this. And so this is not ethical to do this as an experiment, but since it was already being done, Morgan et al. 2013 were like, we might as well see how their memory is affected by this. And what they did was so the training was such that they would be interrogated for like a long time, very stressful interrogation. And then they were isolated. There was an isolation phase where they were just by themselves, which is also kind of stressful. And then for half of the participants, nothing happened. No, nothing happened. They would just chill, right? And that's it. The other half of the participants, for the other half of the participants, a person would come in and say, who was interrogating you? Tell me now. Was it this guy? Was it this guy who interrogated you? And they showed a picture of him, of somebody else, not the guy who interrogated them, but a totally different person. And then eventually, um, they were given a memory test, right? At some point, not right away, but eventually they were given a memory test. And well, as you might imagine, right, that photographic misinformation condition led to a high rate of participants choosing that person incorrectly. The incorrect person was chosen over the correct person. And you might be thinking, well, how similar were they? How similar did they look? They were completely different, right? So this guy on the left was the real person who interrogated the participants, and then the person who came in and showed a photograph, that photograph was of this person, right? The bald guy. Okay. So totally different people. Okay. And what they found is, not surprisingly, participants. Well, here, let's start off with the no misinformation condition. Participants, this is a very traumatic event. So maybe they don't even really encode the face that much. They're so stressed out. And what they found was that, yeah, participants in the no misinformation condition were about 53% likely to choose the wrong person. However, interestingly, the misinformation group were about 90%, 91% likely to choose uh, that person, the wrong person, right? Okay, so in the next video, we'll discuss, I think one more study about implanting false memories.